welcome to Superbwoman Sundays at 7. My name is Janet Neal, and I'm the Queen Bee and founder of the Superbwoman Incorporated. I'm so happy to have you here tonight. It is one of those nights here in New Jersey where we've had ice storms and all sorts of fun and excitement going on all day, but I'm thrilled to have you watching us tonight. And I'm thrilled to have my guest, Susan Ascher, with us, and we'll get to Susan in just 1 minute. But let me just tell you a little bit about why I started this show. It came from my observation that women are very powerful beings, and many, many of us don't either realize it or we're giving our power away. Being a reformed superwoman myself, I know that the superwoman way of living is unsustainable. And it's one where you just are giving away this wonderful power that you possess. And so I've learned through trial and error myself and through observation that when you take the time to step back to understand what is really important to you, what your values are, what your goals are, what your passions are, there is true power in stepping into that being. So it's really all about the be. It's really not being a superwoman. It's about being a superb woman. And so along my journey, I've been meeting all these amazing, superb women who have these fabulous stories about, you know, where they were and how they got to where they are today. And I know that I have been inspired by them. And I thought their stories need to be told. And so therefore, I started the Superbwoman Sundays at 7. And I'm so grateful to be able to bring you them and so that you could hear their stories. So tonight, Susan Ascher is no exception. Susan and I met through a couple of different places, through women's networking events, through Chamber of Commerce's, and we've known each other for a few years. And she has been working as a headhunter. She has worked in corporate life. She's an executive coach. She's an inspiring speaker, and she's an author. This is her latest book. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. Dude, seriously, get your ass in gear. And so we're going to find out more about that. But first, let's just talk to Susan. So, Susan, welcome to our show tonight.
Janet, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor.
Great, great. So, Susan, I was telling them a little bit about you, but why don't you take us through your story? How did you get from where you were to where you are today?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going to try and be brief, be brilliant, and at some point be gone. But let me start by saying that I am a first-generation product of parents who walked off the boat from Germany. My first language was German, so that that was not a challenge to me because after 6 weeks in kindergarten, by the way, I went to kindergarten speaking only German, and the teacher was frantic with my mother, who spoke both languages, and said, "How could you do this?" And my mother said, "We know she'll be speaking English in no time at all," and within 6 weeks I was fluent. So I went on, and that was a little challenge that I had when I was younger, very young, and from there I went on through high school and figured out that I wanted to study business, much to my father's chagrin, who thought that all women should be teachers. Well, not that teaching isn't a fabulous profession, but it was not at that time a fabulous one for me. And so I decided to go after one of the first 100 slots at Lehigh University to become one of the first graduates in their first female class. Not only did I do that, but having come from studying arts and languages, I decided to throw myself into the business college. Which was a little scary, especially when I got my first D in accounting. And now, as you know, Janet, business is what I've done my whole life. So it was more or less, I think, living in a fish tank there with all those young men and figuring out at some point it didn't matter what other people thought. It only mattered that I would be the best at what I could do. And so from there I went and I joined, after 6 interviews, an executive search firm. 6 interviews where they kept saying, "We've never hired a woman. Why do you want to do this? Is that an engagement ring on your finger?" Et cetera, because it was a while ago, and it was not a politically correct era when I came into the workplace. Be that as it may, I put my mind to becoming the best in the office, blotting out all the things that the guys said to me. And after 5 years of a lot of promises, I decided that I would start my own business. Found partners and did that. What I want to say about this story, which sounds a little mundane so far, is that along the way there have been great highs and also some great lows. And I think that's what I'm always working on with people that I'm working with, is that, you know, life is not, as my mother used to say, a bowl of cherries. It's not. Life is a series of ups and downs. It's how we handle them. And around 1989, it's a long story, I'm not going to go into it, but suffice it to say that I had business partners, and what they were doing was siphoning money off of the business to pay their bills and left me in a lurch. I left them as partners without a lawsuit. I simply said, we're not having a lawsuit because stealing is illegal, and that's kind of like what you guys did. So I left, and with my last $3,000 in my pocket, with no business, people being downsized left and right, I hired a consultant who took me into the world of interim executive contract placement, which is now the way of the world. But back in the late 80s, it was a very unusual thing. So again, I found myself in a spot where I had to reimagine myself. And if I had to say one thing about myself, Janet, is that I am the queen of reimagination for myself and for my clients. I was watching, before we got on tonight, the AFC championships with the Seahawks and the Packers. And while I can't say I'm a great fan of either team, I'm a great fan of watching champions, people who, when the chips are down and they're nowhere, pick themselves up in the last few minutes, come back and win a game, or win at their business, or reinvent themselves, or reimagine themselves. And the same thing happened as time went on. We became very successful, and we won every single award. And I had so many gowns in my closet. I was so proud of all those gowns and all those awards. And one day, there was a paradigm shift again in my business. And again, this is probably the third or fourth time that this happened. And I looked at it and I said, you know what? This is no longer a relationship building business. This has become a business of vetting people through the internet. And I don't wish to do it anymore. And it was very scary. And I sold my company, and for about 2 years figured out where I was going next. And the thing is, I had so many things on my mind about the millennium and how mores were changing and how people were changing. And that's when I wrote the first book, which is called Dude, Seriously, It's Not All About You. And that's all about modern manners and things of that nature. And that book became my calling card for my executive coaching business, which 4 years after I started it is thriving. And you know, so it's very hard for me when I see that people are afraid, or afraid to reinvent themselves, or afraid to reimagine themselves, or like in this football game tonight. But you got to dig deep. You got to believe in yourself, and I've always done that. And sure, it's been scary. Everybody gets scared. But the thing is, you just have to hang with it. And I think that's probably, you know, the thing about me. You talk about superb women. I'm not a superwoman. I just don't give up. I just don't give up, and I won't let my clients give up. And so I find myself here today with my second book and a thriving business where, once again, I'm helping people, I'm coaching people, just like I did when I was a recruiter. And, you know, I hear people say, gee, you know, baby boomers say, gee, I can't wait to retire. And I look at them and I quote Gloria Steinem, and I say, retire from what? Retire from what? What if we live to be 90 or 100? Especially us as women. Right. So that word is never in my vocabulary. You know, and you look at the great Joan Rivers, and she was a great woman. She wasn't just the comedian. She was a woman with manners and substance and lots of friends and a career of longevity. And so even though she was a comedian, I look at someone like that, this person was never going to retire. And I think that's something that I would want to imbue with anybody that I meet, because retire from what? We have a long, wonderful life and so many different stages. And while I think that I'm never going to grow old, because I can't think that way, I know that the years will go on and the chapters will go through the book of my life, and as long as I'm growing and as long as I'm changing, and yes, sometimes that's painful, but at the end of that rainbow, you can really find success, and the glory of reinvention and reimagination is probably the greatest thing for me.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, you certainly are a great example of that. I want to go back to a couple of things that you said, and you had shared with me before your story about when your partners were doing things that you felt were unethical, well, basically illegal.
Yes.
But that seemed to be a real turning point for you, and that, in my example of being a superb woman, it's, going back to what's important to you, what your values are. So I would tend to believe that that was one of those moments for you where you kind of had to go back and look at what's really important to you.
Yes, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up. I thought about this today. Janet, you and I, we're not youngsters, we're not millennials, we're not even Generation Y, but all of this talk about gratitude and authenticity and being genuine, I don't know, that was like a gimme for me. That's the way I was raised. I never think that I have to, in this second book, I have a chapter devoted to quotes, excuse me, and one of the quotes is from Oscar Wilde, and it's something that I imbue in my daughter and in my clients. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. It's so important, and why we have to teach people this, why it's more important to have a great picture of yourself on Facebook than it is to have a ethics and decorum and those kinds of things. And I really don't want to sound old-fashioned, because those things, those manners, those caring about people, those doing things for people, they never go out of style. And I recently was given a book by someone. I read a tremendous amount, and I give a lot of my clients tremendous amounts of books, not just my own. Somebody gave me a book that I never read back in the day, and it's called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yes, very much so.
And, and I'm giving it to my coaching clients, whether they're partners in law firms or accounting firms, or whether they're leading teams in corporate America. The secret that these people, these successful people, and I'm going to include you and myself in this, it's what you put out there. It's what you believe. It's what this football team believed tonight, okay, when the chips were down and they had no points at halftime. It's a question of what do you believe in and putting it out there, and that's what we have to do. So for those people who are listening who have lost a job or lost a spouse or think it's not the end, you have to view it as a new beginning. But going back to the idea of being authentic and genuine, as you go along the path to find a new venue for your business or your life or whatever it may be, the more, and I'm not saying the more genuine, I don't want to say that, but if you're an authentic, genuine person, you're going to attract those people. And, this book basically tells people that, whatever you put out there is what you're going to get back. If you believe, and it's so funny, and there's a part in the book that says, you go into a busy parking lot, and you have to sort of believe that a parking spot is going to open up. I'm making it, it's kind of a small joke, but it's true. And it's the same thing in your career if you believe it. There's so much negativity in the world, and I refuse to buy into it. And I'm not a Pollyanna. It's just that I believe in the best of people, and I believe in the best of myself. And I am, it's like, remember Popeye, I am who I am. And take me or leave me, but respect is something that if you give people respect, if you act respectful, the world is your oyster.
Very good, very good. Boy, I totally forgot that Popeye one, so thanks for that reminder.
Yeah, even though he was a guy, he was a good guy.
Yes, he was. So, your book, this book, your current book,
yes.
When you were talking about reinventing yourself and getting out there and asking. Talk to me about, how this book came about.
So this book came about, and I think Jim Collins is a fabulous coach, and he coaches the CEOs of J&J and the Fortune 50 companies. But what I looked around as I was coaching people and talking to people, I realized that there are a lot of things that they have to ask themselves to be successful. And so I'll try and just throw out a couple of chapters, because the first book was about etiquette, filters, boundaries, please, thank you, I'm sorry. We got to have that. That's a gimme. This book is about reverse mentorship. So what is reverse mentorship? Reverse mentorship is when my daughter told me in the year 2006, Mom, get rid of that clam phone, okay? I cannot be with you on vacation, with you running back to the hotel and constantly going to the business center and logging on and looking at your email. So kicking and screaming, I went and I got my first BlackBerry. That's reverse mentorship. When someone's child or grandchild uploads an Instagram picture or a Facebook account for them, that's reverse mentorship. And I had a fellow working for me years ago, and I didn't even realize he was a reverse mentor. And his name was Jack, and Jack came running into me one day, and he said, Susan, we're entering the internet age. I mean, we're going to have to get a domain. I said, what the heck are you talking about? I have a house and I have an office. What else do I need? No, he said, on the internet. And I tried to envision what this place out in outer space would be. So he brought me into the internet age. He made sure we all had email boxes, and he decided upon the name of our website at the time. But the real person who started reverse mentorship, and as I was doing research for my book, I learned that in 1994, Jack Welch, the CEO of one of the most successful companies out there, GE, he started a reverse mentorship program, a formal one, for his top 500 executives. And he said to them, I want all of you to go find a 20-something, and I want you to enter the internet age. Let these people show you what it means to have your own computer, your own email. Okay, reverse mentorship. But the other thing that goes hand in hand with that, Janet, is staying relevant. You know, everybody wants to be 50, who's the new 30, and 60, the new 40, and facelifts and plastic surgery and all this stuff. That's all well and great. But if you look like you're 30 and you're not relevant, that's not great. So what does it mean to stay relevant? You know, it means to, and that's another chapter, it means to read so you can lead people. You've got to know more than just what's on the, on the newsstand when you're checking out at the grocery. No is the new yes. I mean, why can't we just say, that's what superwomen do. They don't say no. They just think they can do it all.
Absolutely.
Yes. And their families suffer and their relationships suffer, and it's impossible. So no is the new yes. For people reinventing themselves or trying something new, analysis paralysis. They think and overthink, and should I do this? Should I go on YouTube? Should I do it Sunday night? Should I do it Monday morning? It doesn't matter, Janet. You did it. That's the point. You did it. And if it failed, then you learned something. And if it didn't fail, then you're a success. So it's a no-lose situation. So, but in the final chapter, I talk about the VUCA world. And again, because I read so much, I probably wouldn't, even other people's emails and the information that they exchange with me. But Kevin Cashman wrote a book called The Pause Principle. And in it, he talks about going slower to go faster, just like a marathon runner. You can't sprint and do a marathon, okay? You have to start slowly. Maybe you go a little faster, back and forth, slow and fast. But he talks about the pause principle to the effect that living in a VUCA world where we are working under an assumption of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which happens to be a military term, by the way, because that's the way they operate when they're fighting a war. But we're fighting, in a sense, we're fighting a war against competition, against the speed of the internet, against change. And so we are living in that world. How do we handle that? So that chapter focuses on that. But this is really, so this is for me the every man and woman's book on leadership. Simple leadership, because we have to lead everybody, and we have to have our people lead us. Our staff, my staff leads me. My new assistant, I mean, she is just, I say she's new, she's been with me almost a year, but she leads me into places that I would not go myself. And it's funny, I just spoke the other day, and I start off by saying, a leader is a person who will take you to a place that you will not go by yourself. And I looked at the audience, and I said, that's pretty deep, isn't it? I said, you know where I heard that? And they all looked at me with big saucer eyes, and I said, in the last Chinese fortune cookie that I opened. But it's true, and that's what a leader does. So whether your child is leading you when they're 5, telling you about whatever they're telling you, because they're all growing up with these smartphones in their hands, or whether you're leading your staff or your spouse or your partner or your friend, it doesn't matter. We're all put on this planet to help and lead one another. So
Absolutely.
that,
And being
yeah, so
open to it is fabulous.
yeah. So this book, and the thing about it is a trilogy, and I haven't come up with the third title just yet. But once I have the title, the chapters just come out, and then I just, my mission when I write a book, because I read so much, is, a 500-page book. I mean, no, I want people to take my book on an airplane, and when they go from here to Boston, they're done with the book, or here to Denver, or here to Chicago. And they can go from here to California and be done with both books, because every chapter is 3-4 pages long, and I get to the point. So it's just, and it's been fascinating, and it's been very well received, and it's a tool for the people that I work with in corporations and also as individuals.
Fabulous. So who has helped you along your path? I know that none of us can do it by ourselves. So who's been influential in your life?
So, you're right, because no man or woman is an island. I have to say, in the very beginning, it was my grandfather. I went to work for him when I was in high school in his business, and I was doing payroll and accounting and all sorts of things like that, answering the phone. But it's amazing, because my grandfather was born, I would have to say, somewhere in the I don't remember exactly, 1906, I think he was born. So, he'd be what, 100 years old? No, 110.
Mm-hmm.
But so he was a banker, but he was very, very formal, extremely formal. He was German, but he went to school in London, and he never told me I couldn't do something. He always said, you have to do it. And when I went to interview for my first job, and he wanted to know everything about it and what would they be paying for me, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, I think they'll be paying me, I don't remember what it was. And he said, oh, that's not enough. You have to drive a hard bargain, Susie, he said to me. Which was fabulous for a gentleman of his era, when there were very few women in the workforce, in the corporate world. So he was a great influence on me. And my father was an influence to the extent that nothing was ever good enough. I mean, I was expected to get straight A's, and I almost did that. I am a human, so I did, as I mentioned, I got my wonderful D in accounting, and that sort of knocked some sense into me what the business world was really going to be. But my father, his thing was nothing was ever good enough, and he, I was the firstborn, and I was a girl, and here we were in America, and no was his favorite word. So I thanked my father in my eulogy to him for saying no, because he made me someone who just never gives up. He made me, at the time that I was a recruiter, the best salesperson out there, genuine. But I mean, I could sell ice to Eskimos. I mean, I wouldn't do it unless it made sense. But I never take no for an answer, and that goes for myself. If someone tells me, and actually a former partner of mine met up with me after I wrote the first book, and he said to me, "Why would you want to be a coach? You'll never be as successful as you were as a CEO of a staffing firm." That's another chapter in the book. It's called Dream Slayers. The people who tell us that's too bad. And I recently had a book signing last week at Barnes & Noble, and one of the people in the audience raised, I said, who here has had a dream slayer in their life? And she raised her hand and she said, she's a teacher now, she said, my high school counselor told me that I was not college material. Mm-hmm. And she ended up going to school somewhere in the middle of the country in Iowa, whatever, became a home ec teacher, and the rest is history. So again, those people, and then my mother, the butcher was her friend. Everybody at church was her friend. She knew everybody, and so much of who I am and my ability to connect with people and my emotional quotient, not just the intelligence, but the emotional quotient comes from my mother. So I'd have to say that. And then my grandmother was, Miss Manners. She used to say to us when we didn't have our napkins in our laps or do whatever, say, you must always eat as if you were with the Queen of England. So those four people, my grandparents and my parents, in all different ways, really had a tremendous influence on who I am.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, it worked. It obviously worked very well.
Thank you.
So, in what ways are you giving back? I know that you do a lot with women and using golf. I know you're a big golfer. But what other ways are you giving back to help other women?
Well, yes, and women and children, I believe that children are the seeds of our society. So, and obviously women are responsible for bringing children into the world. But for women, I chair the Play for Pink golf tournament at Montclair Golf Club, and have taken the club the revenues in 2 years and basically tripled them. So I've changed the whole venue. I've invited men to play with us. I've had a live auction. I've done things. I mean, you know, I had a poster. It's still hanging in my office, and it's the word thinker, and it's upside down, because my staff always said to me, "You're an upside down thinker," and that's what you have to do to be successful. So I did that, and people said, "Oh, the men will never come, and they'll never happen," and the rest is history. So that's one thing. I also am an officer of the Metropolitan YMCA of the Oranges. I have been for probably 10 years, and in 1994 we just had our 20th anniversary for the golf tournament, which gives scholarships to children for financial aid and also for families and women. And I'm also involved with my university and Spence Chapin services to families. So I was a founding patron of the Yogi Berra Museum, and again, that has to do with children, and a lot of them have outlets and places to go in museums. So, you know, Janet, I'm all about women, but I never thought, I mean, it's very hard for me. I never thought of myself as a woman. I would have never, meaning, yes, I'm feminine, yes, I'm a woman, but even at Lehigh, I never thought of myself as one of the guys, and I just thought of myself as, hey, I'm their equal. So you know, when you ask me what do I do for women, it's really for me more about women and children. And you know, the breast cancer thing is fairly new in my giving back. I also am involved in donating and making donations to CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocate, which is also a client of mine that I've coached the board. So, you know, to me, giving back is just a natural thing, and I imbue that again in the people that I work with. It's great to be successful, but you have to do something to give back to society.
Absolutely. So. Great. Well, so we just have a few minutes left here, Susan. What's next for you?
We never know, do we? Well, I'm so in the thick of. Don't forget, this executive coaching business, which I started in 2011. So I'm really in the throes of it. My other business I was in for 30 years. So I'm really just getting, you know, amazing clients, amazing opportunities to speak, and I'm really throwing myself into that full force and thinking every day about what that third title could be. So I'm working on that right now, and as I said, when that comes to me, then it becomes very easy. You know, once I have the title, then I have the chapters. What's next for me? I don't know, but it's not retirement. I mean, and I'm not anywhere near that age-wise, but it's not something that I want to really think about, because I know there's so much more to do. And the fact that I maybe don't, because I am very visionary, and the vision right now is the third book and really getting this business to be a name brand. And when that happens, then we'll see what the next thing. Maybe it'll be my own television show. Who knows? You never know, right?
You never know. You never know.
You're on your way to yours. But I do want to say to whoever is listening, you know, I have a new client now, and she's up for becoming chairwoman of this company, and she's a young woman, and you know, she is having some issues with some of the older men that she works with. And so very briefly in our first meeting, she said, what advice do you have for me? And I said, think like a man, work like a dog, and act like a lady. And she said, do I have to think like a man? I said, well, the reason I say that is I don't want you to think emotionally. And act like a lady means if you were a man, I'd tell you to act like a gentleman. So, you know, that's the advice that I would give to whoever is listening tonight. It's great to be a woman. We're not only women. We're women. Like you said, we're superb women. We're strong women. We have a lot to offer, and we have to believe in that. And we have to take risks. We have to have failures, and we have to be able to learn from them and just keep going forward, one foot in front of the other.
Absolutely. Very well said. What a wonderful way to end. So, Susan, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. And I just wish you all the success with your current book. Again, it's Dude, Seriously, Get Your Ass in Gear. And,
Amazon, Amazon and Kindle.
Excellent. So thanks again, Susan.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And join us next week. My guest will be Kathleen Taylor. Kathleen has started a nonprofit called Radical Kindness, all about helping to get kindness out into the world. So I know you'll be very interested in hearing from her. So again, have just a fantastic week, and we'll see you next week on Superb Woman Sundays at 7.